The Seven Years' War was a global conflict that took place between 1756 and 1763 and involved all the European powers. On one side, Great Britain and Prussia. On the other side, France, Austria, Russian Empire, Sweden, Saxony. In 1762, Spain and Portugal also joined the party. It was the first real world war, with battles on all continents, naval clashes, a total war in which all resources of a country were used to the maximum. It was the bloodiest conflict of the 18th century. The war ended with the triumph of Great Britain and Prussia. After the war, Britain had the largest empire in the world. If you are wondering when and how Britain became the dominant power and remained so for a couple of centuries, here is the answer: with a world war. Great Britain will lose its primacy in 1945 after another world war. Prussia, thanks to the Seven Years' War, also established itself as a great power in Europe. And Prussia will also cease to be a great power in 1945. Cases of fate. But the Anglo-Prussian victory was not so obvious. The forces were equal, but really just about everything that could have gone wrong for the French in that war went wrong. France and its allies could have won, changing the future of the world. It is 1756. This is a map of Europe. Italy and Germany have not yet formed. Belgium is an Austrian possession. The Ottoman Empire dominates the Balkans. Poland is the largest and most populated country of Europe, but is in steady decline. The King of France is Louis XV of Bourbon. The Empress of Austria is Maria Theresa of Habsburg. The King of Prussia is Frederick II. He was one of the best generals of his time, but also one of the luckiest in history. The King of Great Britain is George II. He was the last British sovereign to fight alongside his soldiers. North America is divided between the English, French, and Spanish. Spain and Portugal began the colonization of South America. There are the first European colonies in Africa. This is Asia. In India, the Mughal Empire is in decline. Australia. The English have not yet arrived. Europe had just emerged from a series of wars, so everything is as usual. The last war was the War of Succession for the Austrian throne, which lasted 8 years and was won by Maria Theresa of Habsburg, who became empress at the age of just 23. But everyone was dissatisfied with what had been achieved at the peace table, and it was clear that there would soon be another round. Austria had to cede Silesia to Prussia and wanted it back. Maria Theresa of Austria also wanted to put an end to the existence of Prussia, an emerging power in the heart of Europe that she thought could become a big problem, and the future will prove her right. France wants to weaken Great Britain. Britain wants all of North America for itself. Prussia did not want anything, only survive, and retaining Silesia, which was a vital resource for them. The first move is made by Great Britain, which allied itself with Prussia with the Treaty of Westminster. The main reason was that if France were engaged on the continent against Prussia, it would be weaker and therefore could take away colonies from it. France, which understands very well what is happening, allies itself with Austria against Great Britain and Prussia. Elizabeth of Russia sees the strengthening of the Prussians as a direct threat and draws closer to France and Austria. She also personally hates Frederick II. Frederick II, King of Prussia, now feels surrounded. And indeed he is. He decides to play in advance to prevent the anti-Prussian coalition from becoming too strong. On August 29, 1756, he rapidly invades Saxony, a traditional ally of France. It is the beginning of the Seven Years' War. The forces in the field. The Prussian army is extremely disciplined and combative, and they have good generals. The English land army is the smallest of the great powers, with questionable recruitment methods. Often they use convicts, or idlers recruited by force. However, the Royal Navy is by far the most powerful navy in the world. French army lacks training and discipline, while desertions are frequent, also due to the difficulties in paying salaries. During the conflict, tactical reforms were implemented. The French state is led by the feudal aristocracy, which will lead to the French Revolution of 1789. France's strengths are the alliance with many Indian tribes of North America. The level of training of the Russian army is low, and they have to fight far from their bases, which makes them face logistical difficulties. Poland is weak. Their territory is used for troop movements by Russia. The flintlock musket is the standard infantry weapon. The range is about 50 meters. The effectiveness of the shots is poor, and the possibility of misfiring high. Artillery was also important. In April 1757, Frederick II of Prussia also invades Bohemia to face the Austrians, the main enemy. He besieges Prague, but the Prussian forces are too small. It should not be thought that Prussia is the Wehrmacht, and after a bloody pitched battle at Kolin with the Austrian Field Marshal Daun, the Prussians are forced to retreat. Eastern Front. In the late summer, 75,000 Russians, led by Marshal Apraksin, invade East Prussia. There are the first battles against the Russian army, which is very effective. The Prussians are defeated again. The French invade the Electorate of Hanover, a kingdom under the control of the English royal house defended by the incompetent Duke of Cumberland. Sweden tries to take advantage of this, entering the conflict in September and invading Pomerania. Things are looking bad for the Prussians. Frederick of Prussia is able to defeat the Franco-Austrian at Rossbach on November 5, 1757, and the Austrian at Leuthen. However, defeating the French and Austrians is one thing, but with the Russians it is another. In 1759, the decisive battle took place, the Battle of Kunersdorf, where Frederick II is severely defeated by the Russian general Nikolai Saltykov. At the end of this battle, Prussia is no longer able to stop the Russian advance, and the following year, in October 1760, the Russian armies occupy Berlin. At that moment, however, Tsarina Elizabeth died. She suffered of orthostatic hypotension, low blood pressure, and refused to take the medication she had been prescribed. The successor of Tsarina Elizabeth is Tsar Peter III. Peter III is of German origin. He has a fanatical admiration for Prussia and for Frederick II, whom he considers a military genius. Peter III behaves almost like a madman. Although he has already practically won, he decides to sign a separate peace with Prussia, renounces the territorial conquests made, and even goes over to the enemy's side, offering 12,000 soldiers to Frederick. Because of these quick changes in allegiances by Russia, the Swedish became nervous. They too come out of the war and return home. Prussia is saved. Frederick believes that there has been divine intervention and orders a Te Deum of thanksgiving. Peter III will be dethroned after a few months and locked up in the fortress of Ropsa, where he will die shortly after, but in the meantime the damage is done. Now, suppose that Elizabeth II does not refuse treatment and lives another year, which would have been more than enough, or that Peter III is dethroned earlier. In both cases, it is over for Prussia. With the defeat of Prussia, the war on the European continent ends. In 1759, the French Mediterranean fleet, led by Laclos-Sabran, attempts to bypass Gibraltar and enter the Atlantic, and indeed it succeeds. But they are unlucky. The French are sighted by a British ship shortly after they entered the Atlantic. The English fleet reaches the French in the waters of Lagos and defeats them. In this timeline, the French fleet is not spotted and heads towards the Americas, giving support and reinforcements to the French colonists. The French had devised a strange plan to invade the British Isles, which led to the Battle of Quiberon Bay, in which the French fleet was nearly annihilated by British Admiral Hawke's 23 ships. The plan called for 50,000 French troops, using more than 300 of flat-bottom transport craft to rapidly cross the channel without being intercepted. Then they believed they would easily overpower the relatively weak British land forces. The French also considered trying to start a Jacobite rebellion in Britain by sending the heir apparent of the Jacobite movement, Charles Edward Stuart, with the invading forces. But at the meeting in Paris, Charles arrived late and drunk, so this part of the plan was abandoned. The British never considered this plan a problem, and never moved troops from Europe or elsewhere to defend their island. In this timeline, this plan is abandoned, so there is no Battle of Quiberon, and the French fleet remains intact, limiting the British ability to reinforce in the colonial theaters, at least North America. England and France have huge colonies in America. the French have created a line of fortified garrisons. But the land along the east coast had become crowded, and British settlers needed to move west, in the French lands. So it was almost open war since 1755. The French and their Indian allies, although outnumbered, initially managed to achieve several successes through the use of guerrilla tactics. But on September 13, 1759, there is the Battle of Quebec in Canada. It was a decisive British victory, and the French were never able to recover. But Quebec easily could have gone in France's favor, especially considering the many big risks that the British General James Wolfe had to take in this battle. The French were even more numerous. Instead of attacking, the French should have maintained his position and wait for reinforcements. If the English do not win this battle, their advance will be significantly delayed. The English will be able to advance here and there, but without being able to completely defeat the French. Furthermore, the English naval blockade is less effective since the French fleet has not been destroyed at Quiberon. This is the situation of India. The French in India are allied with the Mughal Empire, an alliance that will prove more of a burden than a help. In March 1757, the capable Clive, acting on behalf of the British East India Company, occupies the fort of Chandernagore, a crucial French outpost. And on June 23, he obtains a major victory at Plassey that virtually decides the outcome of the conflict in Bengal. In the southern India, in 1760, the mixed French-Indian contingent is defeated at Wandiwash. Then follows the loss of the stronghold of Pondicherry. It is the end for the French in India. To change the course of the conflict in India, better leadership from France is needed. A good choice could be François Dupleix. Was the former governor-general of all French establishments in India, with relations with a lot of the native princes. The British victory at Plassey was possible because Mir Jafar, commander of the Indian troops, was corrupted by the British. If the French had successfully prevented the British from bribing him, the French likely would have won the Battle of Plassey. Then at Wandiwash, the French commander, Comte de Lally, must follow the advice of his best general, the Marquis de Bussy, and does not split the forces to recapture the fort, a strategic error that will lead to the defeat. Bengal will probably still be lost, but the French will be able to maintain their positions in southern India. In 1762, Spain enters the war at French side. Carlos III, the King of Spain, was a Bourbon, as the French king. In April, Spain invades the neutral Portugal, a traditional British ally. But after initial successes, they were repelled with very heavy losses. The attack on Portugal was useless, made only because the French and Spanish expected an easy victory, as the Lisbon earthquake of 1755 had destroyed the city, and the reconstruction had drained the royal coffers. In this timeline, the French and Spanish avoid losing forces in this futile attack. Better if the Spanish focus on defending the American colonies, creating another front lines for the British to worry about. We arrive in 1763, with the French masters of Europe and still with most of the colonial possessions. At this point, no one is capable of achieving a decisive victory. There were many human losses, probably around 1,400,000. The costs of war, the expenses of maintaining armies, and the interruption of trade brought all the contenders to the brink of bankruptcy. In 1763, there is an armistice, then a peace conference is held somewhere. Silesia returns to Austria. Austria cedes Belgium to France, as agreed before the war. Britain may not be happy with this idea, giving up something in America and India in exchange for a neutral Belgium. Sweden expands into Pomerania. Britain takes back Hanover, the land of origin of the English kings. Saxony, ravaged by the war, obtains Magdeburg. East Prussia is occupied by Russia. Maybe it will offered to Poland as part of a territorial exchange. However, after the war, aristocrat Stanislaw August Poniatowski, former lover of Russian Empress Catherine II, is elected monarch of Poland, and Poland becomes a Russian protectorate. For sure, there will be no violences against the German population, now part of Russia. The real name of Alexeyevna Ekaterina II, the new Empress of Russia, is Sophie of Anhalt-Zerbst. She was German, born in Stettin. Prussia returns to be the small and unimportant state that it had been in 1700. The German unification will be delayed since Prussia was the moving force. Maybe in the middle 1800 as Italy. Perhaps Saxony will take the initiative instead of Prussia. Or there will only be a partial unification, with Bavaria remaining separate. There is a possibility of German reunification under Vienna, not under Berlin. Everything west of the Mississippi River was promised to Spain. France does not care. There were only 200 Frenchmen in those lands, if I remember well. Canada and French Louisiana are loss-making colonies, maintained only for strategic reasons. Florida remained in Spanish hands. India is split in half, South India to France, while Bengala is British. The alliance between France and Austria is maintained and further strengthened by the marriage, on 16 May 1770, between Archduchess Marie Antoinette, daughter of Maria Theresa, and the Dauphin of France, who would become king under the name of Louis XVI. So, this is the new world. Few boundaries have changed. But a French victory in the 7 Years' War, or rather a French non-defeat, would have enormous consequences. No French Revolution of 1789. A victorious France with fewer debts, with large lands available in America, and able to exploit the rich India, could have avoided the revolution, although it would have been forced to become a constitutional monarchy and carry out much-needed reforms. No American Revolution. With a larger French presence near their homes and the perpetual fear that France's Native American allies would cross into the British colonies perpetrating massacres, the 13 colonies will think twice about a revolution and will reluctantly comply with the new taxes to maintain the British garrison. Then France, having more or less won the war against Great Britain, will be less inclined to support economically the insurrection of the 13 American colonies in 1775, in what basically was a counterproductive act of revenge against Britain. So the Statue of Liberty, created to commemorate this alliance, will never be built. The 13 states will likely remain under the British Crown, following the same path as Canada, a Dominion-style government with a parliament and monarchy as head of state. An American Revolution is still possible, who knows, but it will be postponed to better times, certainly not to 1775. Without the United States, Alaska will remain part of Russia. Obviously, there will be no Napoleon, or Napoleon will be just a general serving the French Royal Army in the future wars, because there will be another war soon, for sure. The only question is when and between whom. Britain and France are still major rivals. Britain, despite its defeat, remains stronger than France, thanks above all to the Royal Navy. The French will need another war to gain the first place. Britain will seek another ally in Europe to counter the Franco-Austrian-Spanish-Saxon axis, maybe Russia, allowing them to play alone with Central Asia. A new war may soon break out in North America. The French would fortify even more the Ohio region and the Appalachians, but it will be hard for France to keep the American colonists' massive population from spreading in the underpopulated French colonies forever, especially if they have full-fledged British Army troops helping them. The British colonists outnumbered French colonists about 30-1. Or the new war could break out in India or in Africa. The partition of this continent will begin soon, and the usual Balkans of the declining Ottoman Empire. So a French victory in the 7 Years' War would have been just the classic truce before a new war.